You wake up as a queen, but not in the fairy tale sense. There's no glass slipper, no Prince Charming, and definitely no happily ever after. Instead, you wake up in a world where every glance is political, every smile is strategic, and every lover could be your salvation or your downfall. Welcome to the court of Catherine the Great, where power is an aphrodisiac and desire is a weapon sharper than any sword. It's 1762, and you're not even Russian. You're a German princess who married into the most backward, brutal, and bureaucratic empire in Europe. Your husband, Peter III, is an unstable man-child who prefers playing with toy soldiers to governing an actual empire. He's also impotent, which is problematic when your primary job description is producing heirs. But here's the thing about Catherine. She doesn't just adapt to circumstances. She devours them. The morning light filters through the gilded windows of the Winter Palace, casting long shadows across marble floors that have witnessed more intrigue than a spy novel. You're not just waking up as any queen. You're waking up as the most powerful woman in the world, ruler of an empire that stretches from the Baltic to the Pacific. And you didn't get here by being demure. Your first lover wasn't chosen for romance. Sergei Saltykov was selected by Empress Elizabeth herself, your predecessor and mother-in-law, specifically to solve the succession problem that your husband's inadequacies had created. It's 1752, and you're 23 years old, trapped in a loveless marriage to a man who spends his evenings drilling imaginary regiments and his nights avoiding your bed. Saltykov is handsome, charming, and most importantly, fertile. The arrangement is clinical, but the attraction is genuine. When you give birth to Paul in 1754, the entire court breathes a sigh of relief. The succession is secure, even if everyone whispers about who really fathered the heir. But here's what the whispers miss. This isn't just about producing babies. It's about learning that your body, your desires, and your choices can be instruments of power. In a world where women are traded like chess pieces, you've discovered how to move yourself across the board. Saltykov is soon reassigned to Sweden, a diplomatic exile that everyone understands but no one discusses. You're pregnant again, this time with Anna, though she'll die in infancy. The pattern is established. Love, politics, and power are inseparable in your world. Every relationship serves multiple purposes. Every emotion has strategic value, and every lover becomes a thread in the tapestry of your reign. But you're not content with duty. You want passion. Enter Stanisław Poniatowski, a Polish aristocrat with poetry in his soul and ambition in his blood. Unlike Saltykov, who was assigned to you, Poniatowski is your choice. He's cultured, intellectual, and genuinely devoted. In 1755, he becomes not just your lover, but your confidant, your partner in the dangerous game of court politics. The affair with Poniatowski is different. It's romantic in a way that your previous relationship wasn't. He writes you letters filled with philosophical discussions and declarations of love. You respond with equal passion, both intellectual and physical. Together, you discuss Enlightenment philosophy, debate the future of Europe, and plan reforms that could transform Russia. But you're also planning something else. Revolution. Your husband, Peter III, ascends to the throne in 1762, and within months he's proven himself to be as incompetent as everyone feared. He alienates the military, insults the Orthodox Church, and pursues policies that threaten to destroy everything his predecessors built. The whispers in the corridors turn to murmurs, then to open discussion. Something must be done, and you're the one to do it. Poniatowski isn't just your lover during this period. He's your co-conspirator. Together, you cultivate relationships with key military leaders, court officials, and foreign ambassadors. Your bedroom becomes a war room where strategies are planned between kisses. This is political seduction at its most sophisticated, where pillow talk shapes the fate of nations. But the coup requires more than romantic intrigue. It demands military support, and that's where Grigory Orlov enters the picture. He's not like your previous lovers. Orlov is a soldier, crude and direct, with the kind of masculine confidence that attracts followers and intimidates enemies. He's also one of 5 brothers, all of whom serve in the elite guards regiments that protect the throne. When you need muscle for your revolution, the Orlov brothers provide it. The relationship with Grigory Orlov begins in 1760, while you're still involved with Poniatowski. This isn't infidelity in the conventional sense. It's strategic diversification. Poniatowski offers intellectual partnership and international connections. Orlov provides domestic military support and raw physical attraction. You're not just collecting lovers, you're building a coalition. The coup happens quickly. On July 9, 1762, while your husband is away at his suburban palace, you dress in a guard's uniform and ride to the barracks where Orlov's brothers have been preparing the soldiers. The troops acclaim you as their rightful empress, and within hours you're marching on the capital. Your husband, caught completely off guard, abdicates without a fight. He's dead within days, officially of natural causes, though everyone knows better. You're now Catherine II, Empress of all the Russias, and you've achieved power through a combination of political brilliance, military support, and strategic sexuality. But ruling is more complex than conquering. Your lovers don't disappear after the coup. They become part of your governmental apparatus, each serving roles that blend personal affection with political necessity. Poniatowski remains your lover for several more years, but his position becomes increasingly complicated. As a Pole, he represents foreign interests that sometimes conflict with Russian policy. When he's eventually recalled to Poland, you use your influence to have him elected King of Poland in 1764. It's a remarkable achievement. You've literally made your lover a king. But it's also a farewell. International politics require you to maintain distance from foreign rulers, even ones you've personally elevated. Orlov, meanwhile, becomes your primary favorite, the official term for the Empress's acknowledged lover. He's given a palace, a massive fortune, and significant political influence. But he's also expected to earn his privileges. You send him on diplomatic missions, military campaigns, and administrative assignments. He's not just your bedmate. He's your lieutenant, your enforcer, your public face in situations where the Empress herself cannot appear. The relationship with Orlov lasts 13 years, an eternity in the volatile world of court romance. During this time, you give birth to Alexei Bobrinsky, widely acknowledged as Orlov's son, though officially he's simply your ward. The child is raised in secret, educated abroad, and eventually becomes a minor noble in his own right. But his existence demonstrates something important about your approach to power. You don't hide your sexuality, you manage it. Your court develops its own etiquette around your romantic life. Everyone knows who the current favorite is, but no one discusses it directly. Foreign ambassadors learn to pay court to your lover as well as to you, understanding that pillow talk influences policy. Your ministers adapt their proposals to account for your emotional state and romantic priorities. It's a system that would horrify later generations raised on Victorian morality, but it works within the context of absolute monarchy. But absolute power requires absolute control, and by 1772, you're beginning to tire of Orlov's limitations. He's brave, loyal, and passionate, but he's not particularly intelligent. As your reign progresses and the challenges become more complex, you need partners who can match your intellectual ambitions. Orlov is increasingly relegated to ceremonial roles while you begin looking for his replacement. The search for a new favorite becomes a court obsession. Potential candidates are evaluated not just for their attractiveness, but for their political reliability, intellectual capacity, and administrative skills. It's like a combination of dating and job interviews, conducted under the scrutiny of the entire European diplomatic community. Enter Grigory Potemkin, and everything changes. Unlike your previous lovers, Potemkin is your intellectual equal. He's brilliant, educated, and visionary. He's also moody, unpredictable, and occasionally impossible. When he becomes your lover in 1774, it's not just a romantic affair. It's a meeting of minds that will reshape the Russian Empire. The relationship with Potemkin begins dramatically. He's a young officer who distinguishes himself in the war against Turkey, catching your attention with his military reports that are as much literature as they are intelligence briefings. When he's summoned to court, the attraction is immediate and mutual. Within weeks, he's displaced Orlov as your primary favorite, though the transition is handled with characteristic diplomacy. Potemkin is different from his predecessors in crucial ways. He's not content to be merely your lover. He wants to be your partner in the fullest sense, sharing not just your bed but your throne. The relationship quickly becomes so intense that rumors spread about a secret marriage. Whether you actually marry is disputed by historians, but the emotional and political bond is undeniable. Together, you and Potemkin embark on the most ambitious expansion in Russian history. You conquer the Crimea, defeat the Ottoman Empire, and extend Russian influence deep into the Mediterranean. But more than military conquest, you're engaged in cultural transformation. Potemkin doesn't just command armies. He builds cities, designs palaces, and creates an entire civilization in the newly conquered territories. The famous Potemkin villages, supposedly fake settlements built to impress you during your journey to the Crimea, are largely mythical, but they represent something true about your partnership. Together, you're not just governing an empire, you're imagining it, creating grand theatrical displays of power that convince both your subjects and your enemies that Russia is a force to be reckoned with. But Potemkin's genius comes with complications. He's jealous, possessive, and temperamental. He can't bear to share you, even politically. When state business requires you to meet with other men, he sulks. When diplomatic protocol demands you show attention to foreign dignitaries, he creates scenes. The relationship becomes so intense that it's nearly destructive. The solution is characteristically creative. Rather than dismissing Potemkin, you create a system where he remains your primary partner, while officially stepping back from the role of favorite. He becomes your chief minister, your military commander, and your closest advisor. But he also becomes your procurer, responsible for selecting and managing your official lovers, while maintaining his own special relationship with you. This arrangement produces the most fascinating period of your romantic life. Between 1776 and 1789, you have a series of younger lovers, each carefully chosen by Potemkin and approved by you. These men, typically officers in their 20s, are given the title of aide-de-camp and expected to provide both sexual and administrative services. They're not just toys. They're junior partners in the great project of ruling Russia. Peter Zavodovsky is the first of these Potemkin-selected favorites. He's intelligent, attractive, and completely devoted to you. But he's also nervous, overwhelmed by the pressure of being the Empress's lover, while maintaining his relationship with the man who chose him. The psychological complexity of the situation drives him to nervous breakdown within a year. Simon Zorich, a Serbian officer, replaces Zavodovsky. He's more stable emotionally, but proves to be greedy and politically unreliable. After 2 years, he's dismissed with a generous pension and a warning never to return to court. The pattern is establishing itself. These younger lovers are temporary, serving specific functions during specific periods of your reign. Ivan Rimsky-Korsakov follows Zorich, and he represents the peak of this system. He's handsome, cultured, and politically astute. Under Potemkin's mentorship, he learns to navigate the complex dynamics of being the Empress's favorite while maintaining loyalty to the man who controls his fate. For 3 years, the arrangement works smoothly. You have your young lover, Potemkin has his trusted subordinate, and the empire continues to expand and prosper. But the system contains its own contradictions. The young men chosen as your lovers are ambitious, and many of them begin to resent their subordinate position to Potemkin. They want direct access to power, not filtered through their patron. Meanwhile, Potemkin becomes increasingly paranoid about potential rivals, seeing threats in every conversation and conspiracy in every private meeting. The crisis comes with Alexander Lanskoy, who becomes your favorite in 1780. Unlike his predecessors, Lanskoy genuinely captures your heart. He's not just performing the role of lover. He's becoming your emotional partner in a way that threatens Potemkin's primacy. The relationship lasts 4 years, during which you lavish attention, gifts, and genuine affection on the young man. When Lanskoy dies suddenly in 1784, possibly from poisoning, though more likely from illness, your grief is profound and public. You mourn him as if he were your husband, retiring from public life for weeks and refusing to consider a replacement. The court watches anxiously as you struggle with what appears to be genuine heartbreak. It's a reminder that beneath the political calculation and strategic sexuality, you're still human. Potemkin manages your recovery with characteristic skill. He gradually introduces you to Alexander Ermolov, a young officer who combines physical attractiveness with intellectual curiosity. But Ermolov proves to be unstable, prone to jealousy and political indiscretion. After 18 months, he's dismissed amid rumors of plots against Potemkin's life. The pattern of selecting, managing, and dismissing favorites continues through the 1780s. Alexander Dmitriev Mamonov serves for 3 years before being caught in an affair with one of your maids of honor. His replacement, Platon Zubov, will be your last significant lover, serving from 1789 until your death in 1796. Zubov represents both the culmination and the corruption of your system. He's young, handsome, and intelligent, but he's also ambitious in ways that his predecessors weren't. Under his influence, you begin to lose the careful balance between personal desire and political necessity that characterized your earlier relationships. Zubov accumulates power, wealth, and influence beyond what any previous favorite achieved, and he uses these advantages to pursue his own agenda rather than yours. The relationship with Zubov marks the beginning of your decline. He's 22 when he becomes your lover, you're 60. The age difference, while not unprecedented in your romantic career, becomes a source of mockery among European courts. Diplomats report that the Empress is besotted with a young man who manipulates her emotions for his own gain. Whether or not this is true, the perception damages your reputation and weakens your political position. But to understand your romantic life merely as a series of affairs is to miss its deeper significance. What you've created is a system of governance that integrates personal relationships with political power in ways that are both innovative and effective. Your lovers aren't just companions, they're instruments of rule, each serving specific functions within the broader apparatus of imperial administration. Through your relationships, you've managed to maintain power for 34 years, longer than any previous Russian ruler. You've expanded the empire, modernized the government, and established Russia as a major European power. Your lovers have been crucial to these achievements, providing not just emotional support but practical assistance in the complex business of ruling an empire. The system works because it's based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Your lovers receive wealth, status, and power in exchange for their services. They're not victims, but partners in a grand political enterprise. Many of them go on to distinguished careers after their romantic relationships with you end. Poniatowski becomes King of Poland. Several of the Orlov brothers become senators and governors. Even the dismissed favorites typically receive generous settlements and opportunities for advancement. Your approach to sexuality and power challenges every conventional assumption about both. In a world where women are expected to be chaste, you're openly sexual. In a system where personal relationships are supposed to be separate from political ones, you integrate them completely. In a society where female rulers are expected to be masculine, you embrace your femininity as a source of strength rather than weakness. The European response to your romantic life varies depending on political necessity. Allied courts tend to ignore or minimize your affairs, while hostile ones use them as propaganda weapons. French philosophers praise your enlightened approach to personal freedom, while British diplomats condemn your moral corruption. But everyone pays attention because your personal life has international implications. Your lovers often serve as informal ambassadors, carrying messages and negotiating agreements outside official diplomatic channels. Foreign governments learn to cultivate relationships with your favorites, understanding that personal influence can be more effective than formal negotiations. The line between bedroom and boardroom disappears entirely, creating a system where intimacy becomes a form of statecraft. This integration of personal and political power is perhaps your greatest innovation. Previous female rulers have either hidden their sexuality or allowed it to undermine their authority. You've done neither. Instead, you've weaponized your desires, turning them into instruments of imperial expansion and domestic control. Your lovers don't weaken your position, they strengthen it. The cost of this system is enormous, both personally and politically. You can never have a relationship that's purely personal, because everything you do has political implications. Your lovers are always performing, always aware that their position depends on your continued favor and their usefulness to your reign. The emotional toll of this constant calculation is evident in your letters, particularly those written during periods of transition between favorites. Your correspondence with Potemkin reveals the loneliness that accompanies absolute power. Even your closest partner must be managed, his jealousy contained, his ambitions directed toward imperial rather than personal goals. The letters are filled with expressions of love and frustration, affection and exhaustion. You're simultaneously the most powerful woman in the world and the most isolated. The isolation intensifies as you age. The pool of potential lovers shrinks, not because of your appearance, but because of the political risks involved. Ambitious young men calculate the benefits of becoming your favorite against the dangers of disappointing you or threatening existing power structures. The spontaneity that characterized your early relationships disappears, replaced by careful choreography managed by increasingly cynical courtiers. By the 1790s, your romantic life has become almost entirely performative. Zubov maintains the appearance of devotion while pursuing his own interests. You maintain the appearance of passion while focusing on succession planning and legacy management. The system that once energized your reign now constrains it, trapping you in patterns that no longer serve your political or personal needs. But even in decline, the system continues to function. Your final years see significant territorial expansion, continued administrative reform, and growing international influence. The French Revolution has made your brand of enlightened despotism look moderate by comparison. And your approach to power attracts admirers among European intellectuals who once criticized your methods. The relationship with Zubov ends only with your death in 1796. Unlike your previous lovers, he doesn't gracefully retire or transition to other roles. He attempts to maintain his position under your successor, Paul I, but is quickly dismissed and exiled. His fate illustrates the fundamental truth about your system. It depends entirely on your personal charisma and political skill. Without you, it cannot survive. Your legacy is complex and contradictory. You've ruled longer and more successfully than most male monarchs, expanding Russian territory by 200,000 square miles and increasing the population by 50%. You've modernized the government, codified the laws, and established Russia as a major cultural center. But you've also enslaved millions of peasants, suppressed rebellions brutally, and created a political system that depends on personal rule rather than institutional development. The question of your lovers remains central to how historians evaluate your reign. Were they evidence of your corruption or instruments of your success? Did your sexuality undermine your authority or enhance it? The answer depends partly on the historical period asking the question. Victorian historians condemned your moral failures while praising your political achievements. Modern scholars are more likely to see your romantic life as an innovative approach to power rather than a personal weakness. What's undeniable is that your approach to sexuality and power was revolutionary. You refused to accept the conventional limitations placed on female rulers, instead creating a system that turned those limitations into advantages. Your lovers weren't signs of weakness, but sources of strength, providing everything from military support to intellectual companionship to administrative assistance. The system you created was uniquely suited to your personality and circumstances. No other ruler, male or female, has successfully integrated personal relationships with political power in quite the same way. Your approach required extraordinary charisma, political skill, and emotional intelligence. It also required a specific historical context where absolute monarchy was still viable and personal rule was considered legitimate. In the end, you remain one of the most fascinating figures in European history, not despite your romantic life, but because of it. You've proven that power and sexuality can be mutually reinforcing rather than contradictory. You've demonstrated that female rulers can be both feminine and effective, both passionate and practical. And you've shown that the most intimate relationships can serve the most public purposes. Your story challenges every assumption about how power works, how women should behave, and how personal and political life should be separated. In a world increasingly obsessed with the private lives of public figures, your reign offers a different model, one where privacy itself becomes a form of public performance and where the bedroom becomes another arena for statecraft. The whispers about your lovers began during your lifetime and continue today. But the whispers miss the point. You didn't have too many lovers. You had exactly as many as you needed to build and maintain the largest empire in the world. Each relationship served a purpose, fulfilled a function, and contributed to your unprecedented success as a female ruler in a male-dominated world. Standing in the halls of the Winter Palace today, visitors can still sense the ghost of your presence. The rooms where you held court, the chambers where you conducted affairs of state, the private apartments where you loved and plotted and planned, all remain as testimonies to your extraordinary life. You've been gone for more than 2 centuries, but the questions you raised about power, sexuality, and female authority continue to resonate. You weren't just a queen who had lovers. You were a ruler who understood that in the complex game of power, every relationship is political, every emotion is strategic, and every personal choice has public consequences. Your lovers weren't a distraction from your reign. They were integral to it, helping you navigate the treacherous waters of European politics while maintaining absolute control over the largest empire in the world. In the end, perhaps that's the most revolutionary thing about your story. You refuse to choose between power and passion, between effectiveness and femininity, between political success and personal fulfillment. Instead, you created a system where all of these seemingly contradictory elements reinforced each other, producing one of the most successful reigns in Russian history, and one of the most fascinating personal stories in all of European literature. You remain Catherine the Great, not despite your lovers, but because of them. In a world that still struggles to understand how personal relationships and political power intersect, your story offers both inspiration and warning. You proved that a woman could rule through her sexuality rather than in spite of it. But you also demonstrated that such a system requires extraordinary skill, unshakable confidence, and the kind of charismatic authority that appears perhaps once in a millennium. The lesson of your reign isn't that every ruler should follow your example. It's that the relationship between power and sexuality is far more complex than conventional wisdom suggests. In the right hands, with the right skills, and in the right historical moment, even the most intimate relationships can become instruments of imperial greatness. Whether that's a model to be emulated or a cautionary tale to be studied depends entirely on the reader's perspective on power, gender, and the eternal human struggle between public duty and private desire. Your death on November 17, 1796, marks the end of an era in more ways than one. You collapse in your private chambers, possibly from a stroke, though rumors immediately spread about poisoning, assassination, or divine retribution for your scandalous life. The truth is more mundane and somehow more tragic. You die alone, despite being surrounded by courtiers and lovers throughout your reign. Zubov is present but distant, already calculating his next move. The empire you built through intimate relationships expires with you, leaving behind only the cold machinery of state. The immediate aftermath of your death reveals the fragility of personal rule. Your son, Paul V, who has spent decades waiting in the wings and nursing resentments about your lovers, ascends to the throne with a vengeance. Within days, he's dismantling your system, exiling your favorites and reversing your policies. Zubov flees to exile. The Orlov brothers retreat to their estates, and the whole elaborate network of personal relationships that sustained your reign crumbles like a house of cards. But the broader implications of your approach to power extend far beyond the immediate succession crisis. You've fundamentally altered the template for female rule, proving that sexuality can be a source of strength rather than weakness. Future queens and empresses will study your methods, though few will have the skill or courage to replicate them. Your legacy becomes both inspiration and warning, demonstrating the possibilities and perils of integrating personal relationships with political power. The European response to your death is telling. Allied courts mourn the loss of a great ruler, while carefully avoiding mention of your romantic life. Enemy nations celebrate the end of what they've always portrayed as a corrupt and immoral regime. But even your critics acknowledge your achievements. The British ambassador writes that, whatever her personal failings, Catherine expanded Russian territory more than any ruler since Ivan the Terrible. The French philosophes, despite their Republican sympathies, praise your enlightened policies and cultural achievements. Your influence on women's roles in politics proves more lasting than any specific policy or territorial conquest. By refusing to accept conventional limitations on female power, you've opened pathways that future generations will follow. The idea that a woman can rule through her sexuality rather than in spite of it becomes part of the political vocabulary, though it remains controversial and difficult to implement. The historical assessment of your reign evolves dramatically over the following centuries. 19th century historians, influenced by Victorian moral standards, tend to condemn your personal life while praising your political achievements. They portray you as a great ruler whose effectiveness was compromised by moral corruption. The implication is clear. You could have been even greater if you had controlled your appetites. But 20th century scholarship begins to challenge this interpretation. Feminist historians argue that your sexual relationships were strategic choices rather than personal weaknesses. They point out that male rulers throughout history have used sexuality as a tool of power without facing similar criticism. The double standard becomes obvious when your methods are compared to those of your male contemporaries. Modern historians go further, arguing that your integration of personal relationships with political power was actually innovative and effective. Rather than being a distraction from governance, your romantic life was central to your success. The lovers you chose provided military support, intellectual companionship, administrative assistance, and international connections that formal diplomatic channels couldn't match. This reinterpretation extends beyond academic circles. Popular culture begins to portray you as a feminist icon, a woman who refused to be constrained by social conventions and instead created her own rules for wielding power. Films, novels, and television shows celebrate your sexuality as a source of strength rather than weakness, though they often oversimplify the complex political calculations involved. But the most significant legacy of your reign may be its impact on the concept of political legitimacy itself. By demonstrating that personal relationships can be instruments of statecraft, you've challenged the modern assumption that public and private life should be separate. Your story raises uncomfortable questions about the role of emotion, sexuality, and personal connection in political decision-making. In the context of modern democratic societies, your approach to power seems both foreign and familiar. Foreign, because democratic leaders are expected to maintain clear boundaries between personal relationships and official duties. Familiar, because the influence of personal connections, informal networks, and emotional bonds on political decisions is undeniable, even if it's rarely acknowledged openly. Your story also illuminates the unique challenges facing female leaders in any era. The assumption that women are naturally more emotional, more influenced by personal relationships, and less capable of separating feelings from facts creates a double bind. Female leaders who appear too emotional are criticized as weak, while those who appear too rational are criticized as cold and unfeminine. You navigated this dilemma by embracing your sexuality as a political tool, rather than hiding it or apologizing for it. The international dimensions of your romantic life continue to influence diplomatic history. Your relationship with Poniatowski, which resulted in his elevation to the Polish throne, demonstrates how personal connections can shape international relations. The lovers you chose from different countries created informal diplomatic channels that complemented formal negotiations. In some cases, these personal relationships proved more effective than traditional diplomacy. Your approach to managing multiple simultaneous relationships also offers insights into the psychology of power. The ability to maintain emotional connections with several different people while keeping each relationship compartmentalized requires extraordinary emotional intelligence. You couldn't allow jealousy, possessiveness, or romantic attachment to interfere with political necessity. This emotional discipline may be your most remarkable achievement. The question of whether your lovers genuinely cared for you or were simply ambitious men seeking advancement remains fascinating to historians and psychologists. The evidence suggests both dynamics were present simultaneously. Many of your lovers clearly felt genuine affection for you, while also understanding that their position depended on your continued favor. This ambiguity was probably essential to the system's effectiveness. Your correspondence with Potemkin provides the clearest window into your emotional life. The letters reveal a woman capable of deep passion, but also ruthless calculation. You can write tender expressions of love in one paragraph and detailed instructions for military campaigns in the next. The ability to compartmentalize emotions while maintaining authentic feelings demonstrates a psychological complexity that few rulers have achieved. The physical demands of your romantic life also deserve consideration. Maintaining sexual relationships with multiple partners while managing the administrative, military, and diplomatic responsibilities of ruling an empire required enormous energy. Your daily schedule included morning briefings with ministers, afternoon audiences with foreign diplomats, evening entertainments with courtiers, and private time with your current favorite. The stamina required for this lifestyle was as much physical as mental. Your approach to aging and sexuality challenges conventional assumptions about both. As you entered your 60s, you continued to take lovers in their 20s and 30s. Critics portrayed this as ridiculous or pathetic, but you maintained that physical attraction and emotional connection were essential to your well-being and effectiveness as a ruler. The relationship with Zubov, despite its problems, demonstrates your refusal to accept age-related limitations on your personal life. The architectural legacy of your reign reflects the integration of personal and political power that characterized your relationships. The palaces you built, the gardens you designed, and the art you collected all served dual purposes as private retreats and public statements. The Hermitage, originally your private collection, became a symbol of Russian cultural sophistication. The Catherine Palace, with its elaborate decorations and intimate chambers, embodied your approach to power as both grand and personal. Your patronage of the arts also reflected your understanding of how personal taste could serve political purposes. The writers, musicians, and artists you supported created works that celebrated your reign while also expressing your personal aesthetic preferences. The line between private pleasure and public propaganda disappeared entirely, creating a cultural legacy that outlasted your political achievements. The educational reforms you implemented were influenced by your relationships with intellectual lovers like Poniatowski and Potemkin. Their philosophical discussions shaped your approach to governance and your vision for Russian society. The nakaz, your attempt to create a new legal code based on Enlightenment principles, reflects ideas developed through intimate conversations as much as formal study. Personal relationships became vehicles for intellectual development and policy formation. Your religious policies also demonstrate the influence of personal relationships on state decisions. Your tolerance for religious diversity, unusual for an Orthodox ruler, was shaped by your relationships with lovers from different backgrounds. Poniatowski was Catholic, several of your favorites were Protestant, and your exposure to their perspectives influenced your approach to religious minorities within the empire. The economic implications of your romantic life were enormous. The gifts, palaces, and salaries you provided to lovers represented significant government expenditure. Critics argued that your personal extravagance drained resources needed for military and administrative purposes. But supporters pointed out that your lovers often contributed more to the empire than they cost, providing military service, administrative expertise, and diplomatic connections that justified their rewards. Your impact on Russian culture extended far beyond your lifetime. The precedent you set for female power influenced later empresses and aristocratic women. The idea that sexuality could be a source of strength rather than weakness became part of Russian political culture. Even under Soviet rule, when your reign was officially condemned as feudal decadence, your example continued to influence women seeking power within the party apparatus. The international reception of your story varies dramatically by culture and historical period. French intellectuals of the Enlightenment praised your rational approach to personal relationships and political power. British observers, influenced by Protestant moral standards, condemned your sexual behavior while acknowledging your political achievements. German historians, proud of your origins, emphasized your cultural contributions while minimizing her romantic life. Your influence on literature and popular culture continues to evolve. Romantic novels portray you as a passionate heroine defying social conventions for love. Historical fiction presents you as a brilliant politician using sexuality as a weapon. Feminist scholars celebrate you as a pioneer who refused to accept limitations on female power. Each generation finds different aspects of your story relevant to their own concerns and values. The psychological profile that emerges from historical analysis reveals a woman of extraordinary complexity. You combined genuine romantic feelings with ruthless political calculation, deep intellectual curiosity with practical administrative skills, and passionate sexuality with careful strategic thinking. This combination of seemingly contradictory qualities may explain both your success and your controversial legacy. Your approach to succession planning was influenced by your understanding of how personal relationships affect political stability. The tension between your son Paul and your various lovers created a succession crisis that ultimately undermined your achievements. Your inability to resolve this conflict demonstrates the limitations of personal rule and the dangers of integrating family relationships with political power. The medical aspects of your romantic life provide insights into both your physical health and your psychological needs. The energy required to maintain multiple relationships while governing an empire suggests remarkable physical stamina. Your continued sexual activity into your 60s challenges assumptions about female sexuality and aging. The stress of managing complex emotional relationships while making life and death political decisions may have contributed to your eventual stroke. Your impact on the concept of female sexuality extends beyond politics into social and cultural realms. By openly acknowledging your desires and refusing to apologize for them, you challenge the assumption that respectable women should be sexually passive. Your example influenced aristocratic women throughout Europe, though few had the power or courage to follow your model completely. The philosophical implications of your reign continue to generate debate. Your integration of Enlightenment rationalism with emotional intelligence created a unique approach to governance that defied conventional categories. You proved that reason and passion could be complementary rather than contradictory, that intellectual discourse and physical attraction could reinforce each other in productive ways. Your legacy raises fundamental questions about the nature of power itself. Is political authority enhanced or diminished by personal relationships? Can emotional connections improve decision-making, or do they inevitably lead to corruption? Your reign suggests that the answers depend on the skill and character of the individual ruler rather than abstract principles. The comparative study of your reign with other female rulers reveals both similarities and differences. Like Elizabeth I of England, you used the possibility of marriage as a diplomatic tool while maintaining actual independence. Like Wu Zetian of China, you demonstrated that women could exercise absolute power effectively. But your open acknowledgement of sexuality distinguished you from most other female rulers, who either hid their romantic lives or remained celibate. Your story continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about leadership, gender, and power. The Me Too movement has raised new questions about the relationship between sexuality and workplace authority. Your example provides a historical perspective on these issues, demonstrating both the potential and the pitfalls of integrating personal relationships with professional responsibilities. The ultimate assessment of your reign depends on the values and priorities of the assessor. If effectiveness in expanding territory, increasing population, and enhancing international influence are the primary criteria, you rank among the greatest rulers in history. If moral behavior and conventional respectability are more important, your legacy is more problematic. But perhaps the most significant measure of your impact is the continuing fascination with your story more than 2 centuries after your death. In the end, you remain Catherine the Great, not because you conquered territory or built palaces or wrote laws, though you did all of these things magnificently. You remain great because you fundamentally challenged assumptions about power, sexuality, and female capability that continue to influence political and social relationships today. Your lovers weren't too many. They were exactly what you needed to become the most powerful woman in the world, and to prove that female rulers could be both effective and feminine, both rational and passionate, both politically successful and personally fulfilled. The queen who had too many lovers was actually a woman who understood that in the complex game of power, every relationship is political, every emotion is strategic, and every personal choice has public consequences. Your story remains relevant not as a model to be copied, but as a demonstration of the possibilities that emerge when conventional limitations are challenged by extraordinary individuals with the courage to create their own rules for living and ruling. In that sense, your greatest conquest was not territorial but conceptual, proving that the most intimate relationships can serve the most public purposes, and that the most personal desires can become the most powerful tools of statecraft. But there's another dimension to your story that deserves exploration, one that reveals the human cost of your revolutionary approach to power. Behind the grand narrative of political triumph and sexual liberation lies a more complex tale of isolation, manipulation, and the psychological toll of living a life where every intimate moment serves a public purpose. You may have conquered an empire, but you also imprisoned yourself within a system that made genuine human connection nearly impossible. The paradox of your existence becomes clear when you examine the private moments between the public performances. Your letters to Potemkin, particularly those written during his absences, reveal a woman desperate for authentic connection despite being surrounded by people who claim to love you. The formal language of diplomacy gives way to raw emotion, expressions of loneliness that no amount of political success can alleviate. You write to him about the emptiness of court life, the exhaustion of constant performance, and the fear that everyone around you is merely acting a role. This emotional isolation intensifies as your reign progresses. The young men who serve as your favorites after Potemkin's semi-retirement are increasingly obvious in their calculations. They study your preferences, memorize your moods, and craft their responses to maximize their advantage. What once felt like spontaneous attraction becomes choreographed seduction, with each gesture and word designed to maintain their position rather than express genuine feeling. The court itself evolves into a kind of elaborate theater where everyone performs their assigned roles. Your ladies-in-waiting learn to anticipate your needs. Your ministers adapt their policies to your romantic preferences, and your lovers perfect their performances of devotion. The line between authentic relationship and political theater disappears entirely, leaving you uncertain whether any of the affection you receive is genuine. This uncertainty manifests in increasingly erratic behavior during your later years. You become suspicious of your lover's motives, jealous of their outside relationships, and paranoid about potential betrayals. The confidence that once characterized your romantic life gives way to insecurity and possessiveness. You demand constant attention from your favorites while simultaneously doubting their sincerity, creating a dynamic that exhausts both you and them. The psychological pressure of maintaining this system affects not just you, but everyone drawn into your orbit. Your lovers must navigate the competing demands of your emotional needs, Potemkin's political agenda, and their own ambitions. The stress of this balancing act drives several of them to nervous breakdowns, while others develop elaborate coping mechanisms that border on mental illness. Zawodowski's collapse after serving as your favorite for less than a year illustrates the human cost of your system. A capable administrator and genuinely attractive man, he enters your service with enthusiasm and genuine affection. But the pressure of performing intimacy while managing political responsibilities, all under Potemkin's watchful supervision, proves overwhelming. His letters from this period reveal a man caught between competing loyalties and impossible expectations. The younger men who follow him learn to compartmentalize their emotions more effectively, but at the cost of their authenticity. They develop sophisticated strategies for managing your moods, Potemkin's jealousy, and the court's expectations. Some become skilled manipulators, using their position to advance their families and friends. Others retreat into emotional numbness, performing their duties mechanically while protecting their inner lives from the corruption of court politics. Your relationship with these men becomes increasingly transactional as you age. The romantic passion that characterized your early affairs gives way to a more business-like arrangement where services are exchanged for rewards. This shift reflects not just your personal development, but the evolution of your political system. As the empire stabilizes and the immediate threats to your power recede, the need for the kind of intense personal loyalty that passionate affairs could provide diminishes, but the transactional nature of your later relationships creates new problems. Without the emotional intensity that once bound your lovers to you, they become more likely to pursue their own agendas. Zubov's accumulation of power and influence represents the logical endpoint of this process. He understands that his position depends on your continued favor, but he also recognizes that your emotional investment in him is limited. This knowledge frees him to pursue his own interests more aggressively than his predecessors. The impact of your romantic system on Russian society extends far beyond the court. Your example influences aristocratic women throughout the empire, many of whom begin to assert more independence in their own relationships. The idea that women can use sexuality as a tool of advancement rather than merely submitting to male authority spreads through the upper classes, creating new dynamics in marriage and family life. This social transformation is not without controversy. Traditional religious leaders condemn what they see as the corruption of moral values, while conservative nobles worry about the stability of family structures. The Orthodox Church, despite its official support for your reign, struggles with the implications of your sexual autonomy. Private sermons and theological discussions reveal deep discomfort with the precedent you're setting. The international implications of your romantic life extend into the realm of espionage and intelligence gathering. Foreign governments learn to plant attractive agents within your court, hoping to influence your decisions through seduction. The line between lover and spy becomes increasingly blurred, with several of your relationships suspected of having intelligence dimensions. This espionage element adds another layer of complexity to your emotional life. You must constantly evaluate whether expressions of affection are genuine or calculated, whether your lovers are devoted to you or to the foreign powers that may have sent them. The paranoia that characterizes your later years may be partly justified by the real security threats that your romantic openness creates. The French court, in particular, becomes adept at using sexual intrigue to influence Russian policy. Several of your lovers have French connections, and the subtle influence of French culture and politics on your decisions reflects the success of this strategy. The irony is that your revolutionary approach to female power makes you vulnerable to the very kind of manipulation that traditional female rulers avoided through celibacy or carefully controlled marriages. Your impact on the concept of queenship itself cannot be overstated. Previous female rulers had succeeded by either embracing masculine traits or by carefully managing their feminine qualities to avoid threatening male authority. You do neither. Instead, you weaponize your femininity, turning traditional female weaknesses into sources of strength. This approach requires extraordinary skill and confidence, but it also creates a new template for female leadership. The template you create is both liberating and dangerous. It demonstrates that women can exercise power through sexuality rather than in spite of it. But it also suggests that female authority depends on personal charisma and physical attraction. This dependence on personal qualities rather than institutional position makes female power more precarious, as your own decline in later years demonstrates. Your influence on European attitudes towards sexuality and power is profound but uneven. Liberal intellectuals celebrate your freedom as evidence of enlightened thinking, while conservative forces use your example to argue against female authority. The polarized response to your reign reflects broader cultural conflicts about gender, power, and morality that continue to shape European society. The educational aspects of your romantic relationships deserve particular attention. Many of your lovers serve as informal teachers, exposing you to new ideas, cultural perspectives, and intellectual traditions. Poniatowski introduces you to Polish history and culture. Orlov provides insights into military strategy and Russian folk traditions, and Potemkin expands your understanding of economics and administration. This educational dimension of your relationships reflects a broader pattern in your approach to power. You consistently seek to learn from everyone around you, using intimate conversations to gather information and perspectives that formal briefings cannot provide. Your bedroom becomes a classroom where you study not just the individuals you're involved with, but the societies and cultures they represent. The medical knowledge you gain from your relationships also influences your health policies. Several of your lovers have military medical experience, and their informal consultations shape your understanding of public health issues. The smallpox inoculation you receive, one of the first European rulers to do so, reflects advice from lovers who have observed medical practices in other countries. Your approach to aging and beauty becomes increasingly sophisticated as you recognize the importance of maintaining physical attractiveness for political purposes. The cosmetics, fashion, and grooming regimens you develop with the help of your lovers set trends throughout European courts. The idea that political power can be enhanced through careful attention to appearance becomes part of your legacy. The literary and artistic works commissioned for your lovers reveal another dimension of your cultural influence. The poems, paintings, and musical compositions created to celebrate your relationships become part of the broader cultural production of your reign. These works often encode political messages within romantic themes, creating a unique form of political art that combines personal expression with propaganda. Your correspondence with foreign intellectuals like Voltaire and Diderot is influenced by your romantic relationships. The philosophical discussions you have with your lovers shape your understanding of Enlightenment thought and your ability to engage with Europe's leading thinkers. Your letters to these intellectuals often reflect ideas developed through intimate conversations rather than formal study. The architectural projects you undertake with your lovers create lasting monuments to your romantic life. The pavilions, gardens, and private apartments designed for specific relationships become part of the Russian cultural landscape. These structures serve both intimate and public purposes, providing private spaces for personal relationships while making public statements about your power and taste. The economic impact of your romantic life extends beyond the immediate costs of supporting your lovers. The trade relationships, investment opportunities, and commercial policies that develop through your personal connections create new sources of wealth for the empire. Your lovers often serve as informal economic advisors, their diverse backgrounds providing insights into different markets and commercial practices. Your influence on Russian law and governance reflects the integration of personal relationships with administrative functions. The legal reforms you implement often incorporate ideas developed through discussions with your lovers, while the administrative appointments you make frequently reward men who have served in your private life. This integration of personal and professional relationships creates a unique form of governance that defies conventional categories. The impact of your romantic system on the Russian military is particularly significant. Many of your lovers are officers who rise through the ranks partly due to their personal relationships with you. While this creates obvious problems with meritocracy, it also ensures that military leaders have direct access to the throne and understand your strategic priorities. The military effectiveness of your reign suggests that this system, however unorthodox, produces results. Your approach to motherhood is complicated by your romantic life. The children you bear to different fathers must be integrated into the succession system while maintaining the fiction of legitimate royal lineage. This requires careful management of both biological and political relationships, as the future of the dynasty depends on resolving these complex family dynamics. The psychological development of your children, particularly Paul, is profoundly affected by your romantic life. Paul's hostility toward your lovers and his eventual reversal of your policies reflects the deep resentment that develops from growing up in a court where his mother's sexual relationships take precedence over family bonds. This psychological damage has long-term political consequences that outlast your reign. Your legacy in terms of women's rights and gender equality is complex and contradictory. While you demonstrate that women can exercise supreme power effectively, you also create a system that depends on exceptional personal qualities rather than institutional reforms. Your approach liberates you while potentially constraining future generations of women who lack your unique combination of intelligence, charisma, and political skill. The religious and spiritual dimensions of your romantic life reflect the broader cultural conflicts of your era. Your relatively secular approach to sexuality challenges traditional Orthodox values while aligning with Enlightenment thinking. The tension between your personal behavior and the official religious culture of Russia creates ongoing conflicts that influence both church-state relations and popular attitudes toward authority. Your impact on European diplomatic culture is lasting and significant. The integration of personal relationships with international negotiations creates new forms of diplomacy that persist long after your death. The idea that personal connections can supplement or even replace formal diplomatic channels becomes part of the European political toolkit. The transformation of Russian court culture under your influence extends far beyond romantic relationships. The integration of European cultural practices, the emphasis on education and artistic patronage, and the creation of new forms of social interaction all reflect your broader vision of civilized society. Your lovers serve as both participants in and agents of this cultural transformation. As you approach the end of your life, the contradictions inherent in your system become increasingly apparent. The young men who surround you are obviously more interested in your power than your person, yet you continue to depend on their attention for emotional sustenance. The political effectiveness of your romantic relationships has diminished, but you cannot abandon the system that has defined your reign. The final years of your relationship with Zubov illustrate the corruption that can develop when personal relationships become too disconnected from political necessity. His accumulation of wealth and influence serves his own interests rather than those of the empire. But your emotional dependence on him prevents you from taking corrective action. The system that once enhanced your power begins to undermine it. Your death marks not just the end of your reign, but the collapse of an entire approach to governance. The personal relationships that sustained your power cannot survive without your charismatic presence. the institutional weaknesses that your personal authority had masked become immediately apparent, leading to the political instability that characterizes your son's reign. The immediate destruction of your system after your death raises questions about its ultimate sustainability. While your approach to power was extraordinarily effective during your lifetime, its dependence on personal qualities rather than institutional structures makes it impossible to transfer to your successors. This limitation may be the most significant weakness of your revolutionary approach to female authority. In the decades following your death, European courts gradually move away from the integration of personal relationships with political power that characterized your reign. The separation of public and private life becomes more pronounced, partly in reaction to the perceived excesses of your system. The Napoleonic era and the subsequent development of more bureaucratic forms of government make your approach to power seem increasingly anachronistic. But the fundamental questions raised by your reign about the relationship between sexuality and power remain relevant. In democratic societies, the assumption that political leaders should separate their personal lives from their public duties is constantly challenged by the reality that personal relationships inevitably influence political decisions. Your example provides a historical perspective on these ongoing tensions. The feminist movements of the 19th and 20th centuries claim you as a pioneering figure, though they often struggle with the implications of your approach to power. The idea that women can use sexuality as a tool of advancement conflicts with other feminist goals of achieving equality through merit rather than personal relationships. Your legacy thus becomes both inspiration and complication for later generations of women seeking political power. Your story continues to evolve in popular culture, with each generation finding new relevance in your approach to power and sexuality. The rise of women in corporate leadership, the ongoing debates about workplace relationships, and the persistent questions about how personal life affects professional performance all find historical precedent in your reign. You remain a figure who challenges conventional assumptions about leadership, gender, and the integration of personal and professional life. The queen, who had too many lovers, ultimately transcends the sexual scandals that initially defined her reputation. You become a symbol of the possibilities that emerge when extraordinary individuals refuse to accept conventional limitations on their potential. Your lovers were not evidence of personal weakness, but instruments of revolutionary change, tools in the hands of a woman who understood that power could be exercised through intimacy as well as force, through attraction as well as authority, through desire as well as duty. In challenging the boundaries between public and private, between political and personal, between masculine and feminine approaches to power, you created a legacy that continues to influence discussions about leadership, gender, and the complex relationship between sexuality and authority in human societies.